Well, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a bit of a change of emphasis. John Sweeney, our guest speaker here, has such a prominent role and has had such a prominent role in international matters, and particularly in the war in Ukraine, reporting from it as a prominent journalist, that we wanted to sort of borrow him from the West Midlands Liberal Democrats Conference to open our own worldwide event that's starting now. So welcome to those who are joining online, and or for those who are going to be watching the recording later. John is our keynote speaker. He's a very, very well-known journalist, a TV journalist, an author of 14 books, and I'm told that he's selling the books downstairs. So please do go and purchase one. But he's been a very, very courageous. He's taken a very courageous stance. He gets into some tricky situations, and I think we're so proud to have him here to speak to us today. I don't know what he's going to talk about, but I could guess. And without any more, I'm going to welcome John to the stage. So without more ado, I'm going to hand over to John Sweeney, your keynote speaker for the day. Welcome, John.
Thank you very much. And before I start, I'm obviously, why is this crazy guy wearing a silly orange hat? So, at the very start of the Battle of Kyiv, it was cold. There was snow on the ground, and I'm bald. And I look in my duffel coat, and there's this orange hat, and I bought it in a ski resort in Italy about 5 years ago. And I can remember saying to the guy, "Have you got anything else? It's an awful colour." and he said, "No, but I'll sell it to you for €3. So I had it, so I put it on. And then very quickly, you worry about, for example, Russian snipers. Are they going to kill you? And my ex was a good friend. She said, "Get that bloody hat off. The Russian sniper's going to kill you." But they were 12 miles away at the height of the Battle of Kyiv, which is actually a long way away. And so the real problem at that particular moment was the Ukrainian cops and Ukrainian soldiers. And I got arrested on day 2 of the war because as a Ukrainian soldier called Demchenko thought I was a Russian spy. And I said to him, "Do I look like a Russian spy?" Conference. Never argue with the Ukrainian with a loaded machine gun. So I was detained and held in a secure place. My passport and press pass was taken from me. But part of it basically, some people play golf, some people spot trains. My hobby is being arrested in funny and strange places. And very quickly, I've been arrested in Russia, and it's unpleasant. I've been chased by the Chinese secret police. I've been arrested in Zimbabwe under Mugabe. And at that moment, we were all threatened. I was a part of the BBC team. We were undercover. The secret police found out who we were. And we were threatened with detention and going to Harare Central Prison, and they threatened us with anal rape. And I turned to my producer, Simon Finch, and I said, "Well, boss, what do we do now?" And Simon goes, "That's the first time you've ever called me boss." But immediately, or very quickly, a very nice Ukrainian lady gave me a cup of tea. And then the guy who'd arrested me, Demchenko, he started Googling me, and he'd seen I've actually doorstepped Vladimir Putin. And Putin doesn't like my question, which is about MH17. It happened in 2014. And then he said, "So you've challenged Vladimir Putin?" "Yes." And then he sees I've challenged Donald Trump, and Donald Trump walked out to me. I said, "You've challenged Donald Trump? You've interviewed Donald Trump?" "Yes. I told you, I'm not a Russian spy." And by this point, they booked for me to go and see the Ukrainian intelligence, the SBU. And I kind of go, anyway, so Vlad's beginning to work out that I used to work for the BBC, that I'm not a Russian spy. And he looks at me and he says, I think you have an interesting story. So the reason I wear this silly hat is because it's proving to the Ukrainian cops, the Ukrainian army, I'm not a Russian spy. And also, while I was just coming up here, I was thinking about the 39 steps. And in the movie, Richard Hannay, the hero, he ends up giving a speech to the liberals by mistake. Do you remember that? And then there are sinister agents. So is there anybody here who is a Russian spy? Would they like to put their hand up? There you are, right, okay. Okay, I'll phone the cops, but they'll arrive too late. I don't think you are a Russian spy. I'm going to take my hat off. By the way, so this means when I wear the hat, people can recognize me. Now I'm virtually invisible. Anyway, it's an honor to be here, to be invited to talk to this conference. But frankly, I feel a bit of a fraud talking to you lot, because please keep it quiet, don't mention it. I'd really like to become a Liberal Democratic MP, but there's only one problem. I keep on failing the theory test. The last time the results came back, and there was this. Early answers spent too much time analysing and commenting on the general situation, and not enough explaining why the individual Lib Dem policies were important. Later answers were underdeveloped, particularly the last answer, which was very brief. There was relatively little constructive comparison with the policies of other parties. What? Would that be the policies of the Conservative and Sewage Party, number one of which is making Brexit work? Are they kidding? Or Labour, the party that wanted to saddle the country with Jeremy Corbyn? Okay, I'll keep on trying to pass the theory test. But I tell you something, ladies and gentlemen, on not the theory, but the practice of democratic politics, well, I know some folk who are truly admirable, and they are the people of Ukraine. They are teaching us something in the West we seem to have forgotten, that free speech does not come free, that democracy must be defended, that sometimes you have to fight like tigers for the rule of law. I was in the Ukraine capital for the whole of the Battle of Kyiv, and I spent more of this year there than here in Britain. I'm going back to Kyiv on Monday, and I'll tell you why. I've seen the evidence that the Kremlin is a lie factory with my own eyes. Vladimir Putin has said at the beginning of the special military operation, it's a war, that Russia is not targeting civilians. The Russians fired 2 rockets at the TV tower in Kyiv, and in the morning I was the first reporter into the Kyiv TV tower complex. I saw blood on snow, the remains of a civilian worker. Outside on the streets, I watched the people from the city morgue arrive and lay blankets on the corpses of an old man and a mother and her 5-year-old child. Civilians killed by the Russian state. That was the first time I saw, by the way, that was the first war crime I saw with my own eyes this year, but not the first that Russia has committed by a long chalk. In February 2000, 22 years ago, I went undercover to Chechnya for my old paper, The Observer, and I saw evidence of the Russian army's use of vacuum bombs. Essentially, it's a 2-stage bomb. It releases a cloud of petroleum jelly, and then there's a second ignition, and it blows up the petroleum jelly, and then everybody around that bomb will die because all of the oxygen in the air is sucked in. People's lungs get sucked inside out. I met one man who said that 14 members of his family had been killed, and he showed me the parachute straps, which is how the bomb is delivered. And I saw evidence and interviewed the sole survivor of the Russian army bombing a refugee column. She was 8 years old, and she told me that she remembered their car had a white flag. There was a stick with a white flag attached. They were refugees, and they were bombed by the Russian army 22 years ago. So, war crime after war crime after war crime. In Chechnya in 2000, in Syria in 2016, in Ukraine in 2014 and onwards in the east, and now across the whole of Ukraine. Again and again and again. But, pay attention to the dates. I first called Vladimir Putin a war criminal in March 2000 in the pages of The Observer. My reporting was lost on New Labour. Tony Blair went to Russia and anointed Vladimir Putin the new power in the land before he was elected. Peter Mandelson was thick with Oleg Deripaska, one of Putin's darkest oligarchs. Jeremy Corbyn gave the Russian secret state the benefit of the doubt over the Salisbury poisonings, an unforgivable betrayal of Britain's national security. Blair, Mandelson and Corbyn were Vladimir Putin's useful idiots. All concerned deny any wrongdoing. I used to work for the BBC, so I put that in every now and then. But they would, wouldn't they? And what, you might ask, of our political opponents to our right? The moment the Ukrainian army liberated Kherson, I put up two flags. The first was their own, Ukraine's national flag. The second was the flag of the European Union. So the Ukrainians are fighting for their lives against Vladimir Putin's killing machine, and they're getting their sovereignty back, good and proper, and they want their European star. And us in Britain, we gave it away. And we gave it away because we were conned something rotten. We were sold a dark fairy story that Brexit would make us freer and richer. None of that turned out to be true, as those of us who voted Remain said so. I'm sorry to say it, but we told you so. For the majority of people who voted for Leave were lied to. Who lied? Aaron Banks. We still don't know the true nature of his relationship with the Russians. How many times he met with the Russian ambassador and his gang, where exactly his money for Brexit, at £8 million, the biggest single donation in British political history, where that money came from. As my friend Christopher Steele, the former MI6 officer who wrote the dossier on Donald Trump's adventures in Moscow, says, no investigation of who exactly paid for Brexit was carried out by people up to the job. By that he means not the under-resourced Electoral Commission or even the underfunded National Crime Agency, but the signal intelligence people at the National Security Agency and the serious investigators at MI5 and MI6. But they have not been asked to do that job, to find out who really paid for Brexit. Why not? Perhaps because the Conservative Party does not want to know the answer. Aaron Banks denies any wrongdoing, but he is palled around too much with the men with snow on their boots, the officers and agents of Russian fascism. He is compromised. His one-time friend, Nigel Farage, by the way, I did a report for BBC Newsnight in Harlow after a Polish man who was speaking Polish was beaten up by a crew of English yobbos. Somebody shouted, "Fuck the Poles," and this poor man was hit. He fell in an awful way and he died. The boy who did it was found guilty of manslaughter, but at the time the police described it as a hate crime. However, they couldn't get the evidence to prove that point, so they dropped that charges. And I did a piece for Newsnight in which I interviewed a Polish gentleman who was a friend of the dead man. And this Polish man said, "I'm very angry with senior British politicians, but I don't want to name names." And me being me, I said, "Name names." And he said, "Nigel Farage has blood on his hands." I then went on to say that Mr. Farage denies this, obviously. But when finally the youth was convicted of manslaughter, there was no conviction for hate crime because the hate crime charge was not pressed. And Farage said that I had done him more damage than anyone else in 25 years in politics. Farage didn't clap me, but I'm proud of that. And I do not think the Polish man who died would have been alive had things been said differently during the Brexit referendum. I think he should still be with us. And the idea that a Polish man, and I remember my dad, who was in the Battle of Atlantic when he was alive, he used to say, "You don't want to fall out with the Poles. Their cavalry charged the Nazis." And their mathematicians gave Bletchley Park the Enigma machines which allow the brilliant Alan Turing and all the other brilliant people at Bletchley Park to be able to smash the Nazi codes. So that, for example, one engineering officer in the Merchant Navy, my dad, lived through the war because Polish intelligence helped us. And the idea of a Pole being killed after the Brexit vote because he was talking Polish, it's abhorrent to our civilization, to everything that my father and my mother's generation fought for when they defeated the Nazis in the Second World War. So, Nigel Farage, thanks to his reliance on Banks's money, he is compromised. Michael Gove, the wit, perhaps the best single communicator in the Conservative Party, the man who sold Farage's dark fairy story in a nicer way to the British people, compromised. The Conservative Party, which has taken so much money from friendly, pro-Western, anti-Putin oligarchs and their wives. The thing is, Liberal Democrats, that there is no such thing as a pro-Western, anti-Putin oligarch. If there are an oligarch, they owe fealty to the master of the Kremlin. They are his slaves. So the Conservative Party compromised. Boris Johnson, you may say. He's been good on Ukraine, true, this year. But for the rest of his career, not true. Boris Johnson made Yevgeny Lebedev Baron Siberia. There's a clue in the name, folks. Baron Siberia, sitting in our House of Lords, sitting in Westminster, sitting in the British Parliament, Baron Siberia. But the interesting person is not the boy, Yevgeny Lebedev. He once interviewed Lukashenko, the dictator of Belarus, and he asked him what his views were on group sex. Baron Siberia is just a stupid boy. The interesting person is his father, Alexander Lebedev. Boris Johnson celebrated his 2019 election victory at a party thrown by Baron Siberia's dad, Alexander Lebedev. And the father was a KGB spy from 1988 to 1992 in London. The Ukrainians like to say that the KGB is like Hotel California. You can check out anytime you like, but you can never, ever leave. Boris Johnson is compromised. And what then of Rishi Sunak, our Prime Minister, who has today gone to Kyiv and announced yet more aid for Ukraine? Good, good, good. But if you supported Brexit and never questioned this simple, plain fact, which is obvious, that splitting the United Kingdom from the European Union was a Kremlin project, you are compromised. Rishi Sunak is not the handmaiden of a KGB spy like Boris Johnson, nor is he a lettuce like Liz. But in standing up for the Kremlin project named Brexit, Sunak is compromised. I have to say that the only party that can be truly trusted to stand up to Russian fascism, ladies and gentlemen, is this one. Ed Davey has no snow on his boots, and good thing too. Having said that, I believe passionately that the Liberal Democrats should adopt a simple three-word policy on Brexit. Repent, rejoin, rejoice. And just in case the Conservative Party aren't listening, I'll say that again. 3 words. Not taking back control. Repent, rejoin, rejoice. Thank you for listening to me. I'm going back to Kyiv, and when I'm not ducking Russian missiles, I'll be working on my theory paper so I can pass this bloody exam. Good luck and God bless. Thank you.